Hi there, welcome to a new video on floating in books. Today's topic is going to be my dark academia reading list recommendations. In case you're new here, hi, my name is Maaike. You are watching my second channel because I also have a main channel where I chat about makeup. And this is the second channel where everything else goes that I can't fit onto the main channel. This mainly started as a book channel, which is why the main bread and butter here are still book related videos. But I am roping in some other things, so I hope you are ready for that ride. And yet today I wanted to chat to you about my recommendations when you want to read some books that go with the dark academia aesthetic. I watched a video by Leonie from the book Leo, which I will link in the description box down below, where she sort of explains what dark academia is, because I've heard a lot of buzz about dark academia, but a lot of the books that are recommended that you read if you want to get into this vibe are books that I've either already read and I didn't enjoy it, or it's just not really going to appeal to me because it's very YA focused sometimes. But then when I watched her video, I realized that I've actually read a lot of things that can fit into the dark academia category, but that I have never sort of categorized in that sense. So there are a couple of books here that you've heard me mention a lot, but there's also some books here that I read years ago that was like, oh, that can work. And then there's a couple of books here that I either still want to read or that I no longer have a physical copy of. So let me just start with the, these are things I've recommended in the past before, sort of pile, and that's 5 books. Very obvious one. I don't know why no other people on Book Talk and BookTube are talking about this, but Genevieve Cogman's The Invisible Library. Now granted, is this very dark academia? No. But if you want to read a fantasy series that has a really kick-ass heroine at its center, and that's really about books in all its forms, shapes, and forms, and you like a little bit of alternative universes, then this. In case you are unfamiliar with the series, this book series has a new book coming out every year in December, it seems. I'm not entirely up to speed with it, but in it we meet Irene, and Irene is a librarian. And what do librarians do? She works for the Invisible Library, and they collect books from different realms to maintain some form of order in the world. Now, some of the worlds she visits are fae-heavy and more chaotic, whereas other worlds are more dragon-heavy and more ordered. And the balance needs to be maintained between those two for sure. So the dragons and the fairies are definitely sort of going against each other a lot, but they also need to work together. And Irene is solving mysteries as she goes along, finding books, but also trying to maintain world peace at some points. And every book there seems to be a different world that is more central. So in the first one we get more like a steampunky version of Victorian London, whereas there's also one which is more like 19th century Paris around the World Fair, I believe. And there's Russia with in the 17th century, and Venice in the 16th century. So each book has an area or an era that's central to it, and there's always something that isn't truly historical but more fantastical about that world. So I really enjoy these books. They're very quick and easy reads, and they're more cozy mysteries, I guess, which is why I'm saying I'm not sure this is really dark academia. But if you like reading fantasy books and you love books in all its glory, then this is a good one for sure. Another book series that I would highly recommend if you haven't read it yet is Oscar de Muriel's The Strings of Murder. Now this is definitely more so on the dark side and less on the academia side, but there is always an academic element in these books. In case you're unfamiliar with these and you've never heard me chat about these, this is centered around 2 detectives in Victorian era Edinburgh, where they solve cases, and one of them is always thinking that it has to do with something supernatural or paranormal, and then at the end of the day there's always a scientific explanation for the manifestation of the crime and how things are coming about. And very often the author has done some historical research and has picked a Victorian era scientific discovery that helps then to explain what's going on with the case and what has actually happened. So it's very much academia, more so in the background, because it doesn't center around libraries or secret societies or anything like that. But there's always this ooh, is it or isn't it kind of vibe to it, which I think makes it much darker, and the topics in here are definitely quite dark. So that's why I think it can fit the aesthetic quite nicely. So if you like that kind of thing and you like your mystery thrillers, but you like there to be like a nerdy factor to it, then I think these are good. And then this one. This is T.L. Huchu's The Library of the Dead. I read this earlier in the year. This is a book series with the second book having come out just a couple of months ago, which I still have to read. And I really like this. This is, again, it's sort of dystopian-ish, but not quite. It's giving me Ready Player One vibes in the way the world is sort of set up. But it feels like contemporary Edinburgh, but right after something drastic has happened. And at this point in time, you don't know yet in the first book what's exactly happened, but we meet Ropa, and Ropa is a teenager who's sort of trying to make her way, and the way she tries to do that is to help people with ghosts. So she is specialized in talking to ghosts, and she can then also tell them to leave your house, but she can also communicate with ghosts and sort of does errands for them, relaying messages to the living. And one of these ghosts comes up to her and says, "My boy is missing, can you please help me?" And then things snowball from there. And the reason why this is more like also heavy on the academia stuff is that we're introduced to something that is called the Library of the Dead in this book. And I can't really say too much about it without giving it away, but let's just say there's a secret society that we are introduced to in the first book, but I'm pretty sure it's going to play a more important role in later books to come, which is why I'm hoping anyways. But yeah, this does have a secret society kind of thing at its heart. But at the moment, we're not fully inducted into this Library of the Dead just yet. But yeah, this is a really enjoyable book if you like something that's fast-paced, action-packed, and you like your unlovable characters like I do. Another book series I have recommended a lot in the past that I again feel more people should be talking about is Jonathan Stroud's Lockwood and Co. series. This is a YA fantasy series that very much centers around this alternate universe where, again, ghosts are a thing, and you have all these ghost hunting agencies to get rid of them, and they are all like the people working for these agencies are teenagers and kids because they're the only ones who can see the ghosts. And Lockwood and Co. is one of these ghost hunting agencies, and it's the only one run by teenagers. So far, the YA point. This is a 5-book series, and the academia part of it becomes more and more important as this book series continues. There is a lot of research that needs to be done in order to be able to know a bit of background to like the house and what might have happened to it, how these ghosts have manifested, and therefore also how they need to be eradicated. So there's very much a research base along all of these cases, and that makes it academia for me. So this has the darkness with the ghosts and ooh, scary stuff, but it also has the academia stuff in the sense of it having a lot to do with research. And as we are more and more introduced to the politics of this world, there's also a bit of a secret society thing going on. So I think it ticks all the boxes for it being dark academia, and again, one that I keep promoting because nobody talks about it. And then the final book in this category is a bit of a weird one. I haven't talked about this book in a while, but I was like, this is dark academia. Maybe not that dark, again, more heavy on the academia part, but this is Selden Edwards' The Little Book. And this book starts and it feels very much like your standard historical fiction novel. However, this involves time travel, and it involves philosophers in Vienna around the turn of the 19th century. So from the 19th century going into the 20th century, it's sort of like set in that time period. And our main character is conversing with Freud and like feeding him ideas for his theories. And there's this particular cafe in Vienna where all of these people would meet, and that's where our main character is going a lot as well. And I don't remember a lot about this book anymore. I just remember it being really fun to read. It is a bit of a bigger one, but this is so well done. It gets the history right. It gets the time travel part right. It's fun. It's clever. And it's just doing a lot. So if you like a bit of an intellectual challenge, then this is a nice one as well, because we get a lot of philosophical sort of conversations and things like that being detailed in this book as well, but it never gets boring. this is definitely, if you like the academia part of the dark academia aesthetic, then this is a good one. And then for some books that I don't think I've talked about really ever on the channel, even before my break that took a year and a half, maybe I did put this in a review, but this is The Last Day of Night by Graham Moore. This is an historical fiction novel, and I think if you want to go dark academia, that historical fiction is where it's at, because I have quite a few here that I have sitting on a historical fiction shelf, more so than anywhere else. The Last Days of Night is about the battle between Edison and Tesla for making sure there was electrical lighting in New York City. So it's based on real characters, but of course a lot of it isn't really known. But the fact that Edison was in favor of a type of current and Tesla was trying to show making a case for another type of current to like determine what would be used. So this is pretty much going into why we have alternating current around the globe as a system, and these scientists battling it out. There's a bit of a mystery at its heart as well, because there's like some like blackmailing going on and all that. So there is a bit of the dark, but again, this is more so heavy on the academia part rather than the dark part. This was a very fun read. It's got quite a like generous typeset, so this can be read really, really easily. And this was just, yeah, it says on the front that it's clever, and it totally is. It's about this scientific revelation at the end of the 19th century. I really like my 19th century stuff. You guys know that about me, but yeah, this was good. And it definitely also sheds some light on these like two real people, because apparently like actual diary and like accounts of people who have worked with both Edison and Tesla and who knew these people in real life, those accounts have been used to create the characterizations of these two very famous names. So yeah, this is, I think, a really good one. If you want to know more about some of the advancements also that Tesla was, for instance, working on, then this is a good one to also get your brain into that sort of space. Let me get the historical fiction out of the way first. And this is definitely more fiction than, like the other one could almost be nonfiction because of how it's done. This isn't. This is by Gaslight by Stephen Price. And just, I bought this because of the cover. I'm not gonna lie. I read it. It's another chunky read, but I liked it. This is about an American, what's his name? William Pinkerton. That's his name, because it has to do with the, William Pinkerton is a detective for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, which is like a huge thing. And he visits London, and there is a murder there, and he starts solving these murders because he's a detective, obviously. He doesn't really know much about like English society, so he has to figure that out. But there's also a lot of focus here on like the early advances of forensic science, and he goes to these meetings of like, I think it was like the Society for like Science, London Science Society or something, whatever it's called at the time. And he visits them, and he like engages with these scientists who are coming up with these forensic ways of doing things, and then he introduces like, this is how we do things in America. And so it has that darkness of like it being London, Victorian London, the fog, the mist, murder, mystery, but then it also has the academic background of what are good detective practices, and how do you find out how someone was murdered, and how do you then find out who is guilty? And that's definitely something that this book has as a subplot, which made me enjoy it even more, because I like that bit of geekiness about my reading. And I thought that this was a really good one. So it was apparently long listed for the historical dagger, probably about like this historical like detective stories for sure. So yeah, if you like that kind of thing like me, then this is a good one. But remember, it's a chunky one. And then this, I think, is a bit of an outlier, but I think it can fit into the category. This is very much a book that a lot of people recommend if you want to get into a mystery thriller, but Marisha Pessl's Night Film. And the reason why I think this is dark academia is because this book starts with the sort of discussions around the filmmaker that is at the heart of this story. And it's dark because there is a murder mystery and there are all these things going on in a story. And it's It's dark because it's mysterious, but it's not necessarily scary or anything. But in case you don't know what this is about, I don't remember what the filmmaker is called, but the main character is is like a fan and doing research into this one particular filmmaker who has a very specific style, and he is very much part of this community, and this filmmaker suddenly disappears. And then everybody is like, what's going on here? And where did he go? And why did he disappear? And then that becomes part of the thing. And in order to, it's almost like one of those books or stories where then the protagonist has to experience the movie that was made in order to find out what happened. And that's like the dark part, because these movies were not for the faint of heart. That's very clear from the start. So yeah, this is a bit of a weird one. I don't think it's for everyone. But again, it's got the sort of like academic discussions about what is this filmmaker, what were his motives, etc. That part is definitely part of it, but also it has the darkness, not only because of the topic of these movies, but also because the protagonist ends up pretty much reliving one of the movies that he is a big fan of. The next book that I have as a recommendation is again one of those things where it's like, is it really dark academia? But it's definitely academia, and that's A Natural History of Dragons by Brennan. And this is another book series I've never heard anybody talking about. But I was intrigued with this because it kind of looks like the anatomy of a dragon, which is, of course, fantastical beast. But this is written like a memoir of Lady Trent, our main character. And she travels along with her husband, who, in this world where she lives, dragons are a real thing. So we get a fully historical, 19th century setting, but instead of looking for dinosaurs, they're looking for dragons, that sort of vibe. And you get all of the scientific information that we know about dragons and how dragons as a species work and all that. So it's very heavy on the academia front from that perspective, and not so necessarily dark, unless you count the fact that it's fire-breathing dragons that we're dealing with here. But yeah, she is a scientist, and when her husband, I think he gets lost, she kind of takes over, and she becomes this really famous name in society who's a specialist on dragons. I've only read the first one. I have the other two, the next two books in the series as well. I believe it's still an ongoing series, and it's just a really funny one. It's you don't get any sort of information. You're just plunged into this historical settings. And the only thing that's different from real life society is that we have dragons as another species of creatures to deal with. And that's what she is trying to research. So maybe not that dark, but definitely academia. And then finally in this category of the video, I have for you Elizabeth Kostova, the historian. And this book, it's another chunky one. I like my chunky reads. I think that if we combine darkness and academia, this is the perfect thing, and I haven't heard anybody talking about it. It was a bit slow at times. This is definitely a slow burner for sure. This is about a girl who tells a story of her father through her diary entries, going back to her father's diary entries, as his PhD supervisor mysteriously disappears, and he takes her along around Europe trying to figure out what happened to his PhD supervisor all those years ago. And she very quickly figures out that something is also up with her dad, and we sort of get these snippets. And she's sort of telling the story here and how she finds out about it. Let's just say, am I giving too much away if I tell you this? Maybe if you think of reading this, maybe don't watch the next bit, because this is a bit of a spoiler, but let's just say that this book plays around with the fact that Dracula is real, and he has a thirst of knowledge, and he is hiring scholars to build up his personal library. And her dad somehow gets caught up in the trap. So this is very much it's got vampires, it's got the scholarships, it's got the the academia aspect there in there as well. And this was a really good one. I really enjoyed it, but like I said, it is a slow burner, but it is a very rewarding one, because once you're done, you're this is one of those books that keeps tugging at your brain even after you finished it, and that to me is always a sign of a really good read. I've got a couple of more books to mention for you. I think this is one though that I've heard other people mention as well. This is Lev Grossman's The Magician. So this is about a wizarding school setting, but more like adult and grown up. And they have to develop themselves as magicians. So you have that school setting for sure. And it's very dark. And mainly because the characters are just so unlikable. And the kind of magic they do also has a lot more damage than we usually find. This is a book though that I kind of felt went off the rails towards the end when they have to do like their final proof or something like that. That's when I was like, I was kind of done with it then. I did like it in the end, but not enough to continue the rest of the series, especially once they get into these like magical lands. It got very confusing, so that's why I was like, I think just sticking to the first one makes it dark academia for sure. I'm not sure whether the rest of the series is as well. And then a book I haven't read yet, but the blurb on the back makes me think that Michael Cox's The Meaning of Night could be. This is the first line. This is the extraordinary story of Edward Gliver, book lover, scholar, and murderer. Okay. So I was like, that might actually be something that's up my street. I've had this for more than a decade and I have yet to read it. But yeah, if he is and a scholar and a murderer, dark academia, I think so. I think it can fit the bill, but not entirely sure on that. And then I've got some books here for you that I don't have physically sitting on my shelves. So one book that I don't hear anybody talking about in terms of dark academia is Carlos Ruiz Zafón's The Shadow of the Wind. I mean, again, not that dark, but there is something seemingly very mysterious going on throughout the book. We don't really know what's going on. And all of the mysterious things start happening after our main character takes a book from this secret library. How is that not dark academia? This is a book I no longer have sitting on my shelves. I decluttered it a while ago because after reading it once, you kind of know where the story goes, and I didn't feel like rereading it at all or going back to that, because I believe it's a series and we get other books in it as well, but I've never really been enticed to read the rest. But that first book is definitely one of the like dark academia books, but it's, again, not that dark perhaps, but it definitely has a mystery at its heart. And then the final fiction book I want to mention is by Muriel Barbary, and this is The Elegance of the Hedgehog. Here again, not very dark, but definitely academia. This was a very enjoyable book. Again, another book I thought I was going to go back to, so when I decluttered my shelves, I did get rid of it. So I'll pop a picture up on the screen. But this book was about a lady who lives in this building in Paris where she's the concierge, and she ends up being really, really clever, and she's really like into like theories and philosophy and art, and she can actually, when she starts to interact more with the residents of the building, this all comes to light, you could say. So how clever she actually is. This isn't dark in the sense there is no murder at its heart, there is no secret society. It's more like a contemporary novel about someone who is not what people usually expect her to be, because she's just the concierge. But it is quite sad at the end, I'm not gonna lie. So that's why this definitely, it's the outlier for sure here. It's the most not dark because there are no murders, no nothing like that happening, but it does have a very sad element to it as well. And finally, I think dark academia can also be nonfiction. Bear with me. I mean, true crime is everywhere, but I think the best true crime thing I have come across is a book by Judith Flanders called The Invention of Murder. And The Invention of Murder is a book about how the Victorians were obsessed with murder trials and how that then portrayed in the media. So she goes over what happened, so the detective part of it, the murder, how it happened, how detectives solved the case in the court case, but then it also goes into how the court case was reported in media and what literary spin-offs, be it Penny Dreadfuls or anything like that, came into being as a result because the people wanted more. So I think if we want to go dark academia, I think it's like the penultimate, like where it all comes together. Again, no secret society, but I think that definitely counts. So that's it for me for today. Those were the things I wanted to mention in today's video as my reading list. If you were looking for recommendations for a dark academia reading list, I think now's the time of the year to get stuck into something like this. I'm currently reading something myself that falls into the category as well, so if you want to hear my thoughts, then definitely stay tuned, or maybe by the time this video goes up, I may have already told you about it. I don't know what the order is going to be and which way up, because I'm filming this quite early. But yeah, this was just an idea I had, and I just wanted to get it out there. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thumbs up the video if you liked it, and I hope you'd like to stay tuned for more. I make a video on here every single week, so I hope to see you next Wednesday. Bye.